The rain was coming down hard that night in San Francisco. Droplets raced down the windshield of a sleek black Tesla as its owner, Alex Wong, squinted through the blur of his wipers. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Investors were panicking about the latest dip in his company's stock price. "Listen, just tell them we'll have the numbers by morning," Alex said into his earpiece, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as he waited for the light to change. At 35, he built his tech company from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. But success came with a price: endless calls, constant pressure, and nights like this when he couldn't even think straight. The light turned green, and Alex pressed the accelerator. His mind was on tomorrow's board meeting, not on the dark, wet streets ahead. His phone buzzed again. He glanced down for just a second, one quick look at the caller ID. That's when it happened. A figure appeared in his headlights, seemingly out of nowhere. An older man, hunched against the rain, crossing the street with slow, shuffling steps. Alex's heart jumped into his throat. He slammed on the brakes, but the wet road worked against him. The car skidded. Time seemed to slow down. Alex could see everything in horrible detail: the man's worn jacket, his startled expression as he turned toward the headlights, his hands raising in a futile attempt to protect himself. The car's anti-lock brakes pulsed desperately against the slick asphalt. The impact, when it came, was somehow both softer and more terrible than Alex had expected. The man rolled across the hood, then crumpled to the ground in front of the car. Oh God, no," Alex muttered, his hands shaking as he threw the car into park. He jumped out into the rain, nearly slipping on the wet pavement in his expensive leather shoes. "Someone call an ambulance," he shouted to the few pedestrians who had stopped to stare. The old man was conscious, lying on his side and groaning softly. Rain pelted his face, which was lined with years of hard living. His clothes were ragged but clean, someone who was struggling but still trying to maintain dignity. "Don't move," Alex said, kneeling beside him and shrugging off his suit jacket to cover the man. "Help is coming." "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The man's eyes fluttered open, dark brown eyes that seemed strangely familiar. "It's okay, son," he said in a rough voice. "Wasn't your fault. Shouldn't have been crossing here anyway." Alex's throat tightened at the gentle forgiveness in those words. He was a man who had nothing, who'd just been hit by a car, and his first instinct was to comfort the person who'd hit him. As Alex waited for the ambulance, he noticed more details about the man. His hands were large and calloused, working hands. A faded military tattoo peeked out from beneath one sleeve, the kind given to soldiers who'd served in the Gulf War. Something about that tattoo tugged at Alex's memory. His mother had mentioned something once, during one of those rare moments when she'd talk about his father. "Your dad had this eagle tattoo on his wrist," she'd said. "Got it with his unit overseas. I used to trace it with my finger when he was sleeping." Alex's hands went cold, and it wasn't from the rain. He looked more closely at the man's face, really looked this time. The shape of his nose, the set of his jaw, the way his right eyebrow had a slight arch to it. The wail of approaching sirens broke through his thoughts. Soon the street was awash in red and blue lights, reflecting off the wet pavement like a disco ball. Paramedics swarmed around them, their practiced hands checking vitals and stabilizing the man's neck. "I'm riding with him," Alex said when they loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. It wasn't a question. The paramedic just nodded, probably assuming he was worried about liability. But as Alex climbed into the ambulance, his eyes fixed on that familiar face, he knew this was about something much bigger than legal responsibility. His heart was pounding with a wild possibility, one that seemed impossible yet felt absolutely true in his bones. Had he just hit his own father with his car? The same father who'd walked out of their lives 30 years ago, leaving behind a confused 5-year-old boy and a heartbroken wife. The man his mother had eventually stopped talking about, whose name became a heavy silence in their small apartment. The ambulance rocked as it sped through the rainy streets, its siren cutting through the night. Alex watched the paramedics work, his mind spinning with questions. He'd spent years building his company, creating cutting-edge technology, becoming one of the youngest billionaires in the country. But right now, none of that mattered. Because here, on this rainy night in San Francisco, the past had literally crashed into the present, and Alex knew with absolute certainty that his life would never be the same. On the stretcher, the old man drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words that Alex couldn't quite catch. But one phrase came through clearly. "Tell Linda I'm sorry." Linda, his mother's name. Alex's hands started trembling again, but not from the accident this time. After all these years of wondering, of trying to fill the dad-shaped hole in his life with work and success, the universe had brought them together in the most unexpected way possible. As the ambulance raced toward the hospital, Alex realized this was just the beginning. There would be questions to answer, wounds to heal, and bridges to build, if both men were brave enough to try. The hospital waiting room buzzed with the usual late-night energy. Nurses rushing past with charts, tired doctors checking their phones, worried families huddled in uncomfortable chairs. But Alex barely noticed any of it. He sat alone, his rain-soaked clothes slowly drying in the air-conditioned room, staring at his hands. Those hands had built an empire. They'd signed million-dollar contracts, created revolutionary software, and changed the tech industry forever. But right now, they felt as small and helpless as they'd been 30 years ago when he'd watched his father walk out the door for the last time. "Mr. Wom." A young doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. "You came in with the pedestrian accident victim." Alex jumped to his feet. "Yes, how is he?" "He's stable. Some bruised ribs, a mild concussion, and various scrapes and bruises. He's very lucky. It could have been much worse. We'd like to keep him overnight for observation." "Can I see him?" The doctor hesitated. "He's asking for privacy right now. Says he doesn't want to be a bother." That sounded exactly like what Alex remembered about his father, always trying to fade into the background, never wanting to cause trouble. Even when his PTSD had been at its worst, he'd hide his struggles, stepping outside during his nightmares so he wouldn't wake his family. "Please," Alex said. "I need to talk to him. It's important." Something in his voice must have convinced the doctor. "Room 342, but keep it brief. He needs rest." The walk to the room felt like the longest journey of Alex's life. Each step brought back memories. His father teaching him to ride a bike, reading him bedtime stories, then later, the distant looks, the jumpiness, the way he'd sometimes stare into space during dinner. The door to room 342 was partially open. Alex could see the old man lying there, looking small and vulnerable in the hospital bed. An IV drip fed into his arm, and a heart monitor beat steadily beside him. "Come in," the man said before Alex could knock. "I know you're there." Alex stepped into the room, his heart pounding. Up close, without the rain and chaos of the accident scene, there was no doubt. This was his father. Older, weathered by years on the street, but unmistakably the same man who'd once carried him on his shoulders. "How are you feeling?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Been better," the old man chuckled, then winced. "But been worse too. Don't worry about me, son. I know you probably have better things to do than sit here with some old homeless guy." "Dad," Alex said, and the word hung in the air between them like a live wire. The old man went very still. Then, slowly, he turned to look at Alex, really look at him. His eyes widened with recognition, and tears began to form. "Little Alex," he whispered, "is it really you?" Alex nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Oh God," his father said, covering his face with his hands. "Oh God, no, not like this. I never wanted you to see me like this." "Why?" Alex finally managed to ask. "Why did you leave us?" His father lowered his hands, revealing eyes full of pain and shame. "I was broken, son. The war, it did something to me. Changed me. The nightmares, the flashbacks. I couldn't control them. One night, I almost hurt your mother during a nightmare. That's when I knew I had to go. You both deserved better than a damaged man who couldn't even trust himself." "We deserved a father," Alex said, his voice cracking. "We deserved the truth. Do you know what it was like, growing up wondering if it was something I did? If I wasn't good enough?" "No, no," his father said urgently, reaching for him. "You were perfect. You were everything. That's why I left, because I couldn't bear the thought of hurting you. I thought if I got help, got myself straight, I could come back. But the help I needed, I couldn't afford it. Everything spiraled. Before I knew it, years had passed, and I was too ashamed to face you." Alex sank into the chair beside the bed, overwhelmed by the weight of all these years, all these unspoken words. I saw you in the papers, his father continued softly. Read about your company. I was so proud, watching you succeed from afar. Sometimes I'd stand outside your office building just to feel close to you. But I never had the courage to walk in. All this time, Alex said, you were right here in the city. His father nodded. Couldn't bring myself to leave completely. Had to know you were okay, even if I couldn't be part of your life. The heart monitor beeped steadily in the background as silence fell between them. Outside the room, nurses chatted and carts rattled past, but in here, time seemed to stand still. Finally, Alex spoke. The doctors said you'll be okay. But when you get out of here, things are going to be different. Son, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Alex interrupted. I spent years being angry at you. Then I tried to forget you. But now I just want to understand. And maybe it's not too late to fix what's broken. His father's eyes filled with tears again. I don't deserve a second chance. Maybe not, Alex said. But I deserve the chance to know my father. And this time, you're not disappearing. The first light of dawn was beginning to peek through the hospital window, painting the room in soft gold. A new day was starting, and with it, perhaps, a new chapter in both their lives. Neither man knew exactly what would happen next, but for the first time in 30 years, they were ready to find out together. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital visits and paperwork. Alex found himself splitting time between his company's boardroom and his father's hospital room. In the boardroom, he was the confident billionaire CEO everyone expected. But in that small hospital room, he felt like that confused 5-year-old boy again, trying to understand the world. Your ribs are healing nicely, the doctor said during morning rounds. We can probably discharge you tomorrow. Alex watched his father's face tighten with anxiety. He knew what the old man was thinking. Back to the streets, back to surviving day by day. He's coming home with me, Alex said firmly. His father started to protest, but Alex cut him off. Just until you're fully recovered. My place has plenty of room. That was an understatement. Alex's penthouse took up the entire top floor of one of San Francisco's most exclusive buildings. He bought it 3 years ago, but barely spent time there, usually falling asleep at his office instead. I don't want to impose, his father mumbled, picking at the hospital blanket. You're not imposing, you're family. The word felt strange on Alex's tongue, family. For so long, it had just been him and his mom. Speaking of which, I need to tell Mom, Alex said quietly. She deserves to know. His father's face went pale. Linda, how is she? Remarried. Lives in Portland now. She's happy. Alex watched the pain flash across his father's face. But she deserves to know you're alive. That you're here. Later that night, after leaving the hospital, Alex sat in his car and made one of the hardest phone calls of his life. Mom, I need to tell you something. There was a long silence after he finished explaining. Then he's really alive. Yes, and he's sorry, Mom. So sorry. He heard her take a shaky breath. I spent years being angry at him. Then I spent years trying not to care. Now, I don't know what to feel. You don't have to feel anything, Alex assured her. You don't even have to see him if you don't want to. I just thought you should know. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. And Alex, be careful with your heart, okay? The next day, Alex helped his father check out of the hospital. The old man had nothing but the clothes on his back, the same ones he'd been wearing during the accident, now cleaned by the hospital staff. We'll need to get you some new clothes, Alex said as they rode the elevator up to his penthouse. His father didn't respond. He was too busy staring at everything with wide eyes, the marble floors, the gold-trimmed mirrors, the uniformed security guard who'd nodded respectfully at Alex. The elevator opened directly into Alex's apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city, and modern art pieces worth millions decorated the walls. But Alex suddenly saw it all through his father's eyes. How cold and impersonal it all looked, how unlike a home. The guest room is this way, he said, leading his father down a hallway. Bathrooms attached. There are clean towels and, Dad? His father had stopped in the middle of the hallway, staring at something on the wall. It was a framed photograph. 5-year-old Alex sitting on a swing, laughing at the camera. Your mother sent me school pictures every year, Alex explained. Until you left. This was the last one. His father reached out with trembling fingers, almost touching the glass but not quite. "You were so small," he whispered. "So innocent. I thought I was protecting you, but—" "You can't change the past," Alex said, "but we can try to build something new, if you're willing." His father turned to him, eyes wet. "I don't know how to be a father anymore." "And I don't know how to be a son," Alex admitted. "Maybe we can figure it out together." That night, Alex ordered dinner from his usual fancy restaurant, only to realize his father was overwhelmed by the menu's complexity. They ended up eating pizza instead, sitting on the floor because it felt less formal than the dining table. "Tell me about your life," Alex said. "Where have you been all these years?" His father took a deep breath. "It's not a pretty story. I want to know. All of it." So his father talked. About the PTSD that had driven him away. About trying to get help but getting lost in the maze of veteran services. About pride keeping him from asking for help when he still could, then shame keeping him away when things got really bad. "I lived in a shelter for a while," he said. "Then under the bridge near the park. Did odd jobs when I could get them. The hardest part wasn't the cold or the hunger, it was seeing people look right through you, like you're not even human anymore." Alex thought about all the times he'd walked past homeless people without a second glance. Had any of them been his father? "Things are different now," Alex said firmly. "You're not alone anymore." His father looked down at his pizza slice. "I can't take advantage of your success, son. I didn't earn this." "You're not taking advantage. You're my father. And maybe this is about more than just us. Maybe we can help others too." An idea was forming in Alex's mind. His company had billions in resources. What if they could create a program specifically for homeless veterans? Housing, job training, mental health support, a real chance to rebuild their lives. But that was a conversation for another day. Right now, he just wanted to sit here with his father, eating pizza and trying to bridge the gap of 30 lost years. Later, as Alex lay in bed listening to the quiet sounds of his father settling into the guest room, he thought about what his mother had said. "Be careful with your heart." The first week of living together was like walking on eggshells. Both father and son moved carefully around each other, afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. Alex's father kept trying to make himself useful, washing dishes, making his bed with military precision, even attempting to fix a leaky faucet until Alex insisted on calling a plumber. "You don't have to earn your place here," Alex told him one morning, watching his father meticulously clean the kitchen counter. "This isn't a transaction." "Old habits," his father replied with a sad smile. "On the streets, everything's a transaction. You learn quick that nothing's really free." That afternoon, Alex left work early, something that shocked his executive team, and took his father shopping. The old man protested at first, especially when he saw the high-end department store Alex had chosen. "I don't need fancy clothes," he mumbled. "How about we let you decide what you need?" Alex suggested gently. "Just try things on, whatever feels comfortable." Slowly, his father began picking out clothes, simple, practical items in dark colors. But when he came out of the fitting room wearing new jeans and a clean button-down shirt, standing straighter than Alex had seen him stand before, something changed in his eyes, like he was remembering who he used to be. "You look good, Dad," Alex said softly. His father caught his reflection in the mirror and stood there for a long moment. "I look human again." That night, they had their first real argument. Alex had scheduled an appointment with a top psychiatrist who specialized in veteran PTSD, but his father refused to go. "I'm not crazy," he snapped. "I don't need some doctor poking around in my head." "Nobody said you're crazy," Alex replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "But you're hurting. You've been hurting for 30 years, and I can't watch you suffer anymore. You think a fancy doctor can fix everything, make up for all those years?" "No," Alex said, "but maybe they can help us not lose any more years." His father fell silent, staring out the window at the city lights below. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared, son. Scared of facing it all again. Scared of failing. Scared of disappointing you. Again." Alex moved to stand beside him. "You know what scares me? The thought of losing you again. Please, Dad, just try. For me." The next morning, his father went to the appointment. He came back quiet but thoughtful and agreed to schedule another session. That weekend, Alex's assistant came by with some urgent contracts that needed signing. His father watched from the kitchen as Alex read through complex legal documents, making notes and changes with practiced ease. "I still can't believe it sometimes," his father said later. "My little boy, running this huge company. Your mother, she did a good job raising you." "She did," Alex agreed. "But there were times I needed my dad too." They were sitting on the balcony, watching the sun set over the bay. The evening was cool, and Alex had given his father one of his old sweaters to wear. "I used to dream about moments like this," his father admitted. "Just sitting with you, talking, being your dad again, but I never thought, never imagined it could really happen." "Life's funny that way," Alex said. "Sometimes the things we think are impossible just need a chance to happen." His father shifted in his chair. "I've been thinking about what you said. About helping others. Yeah, there are so many vets out there like me. Good people who just got lost somehow, if we could reach them before they end up on the streets." Alex smiled. This was the first time his father had used "we" when talking about the future. "I have some ideas about that," Alex said, "but I'll need your help. You understand what they're going through in a way I never could." For the first time since they'd reunited, his father's eyes lit up with real purpose. "You trust me with something like that?" "Dad, who better? You've lived it. You know what works, what doesn't, what people really need." They stayed up late that night, brainstorming ideas. His father knew every shelter in the city, every soup kitchen, every place where veterans gathered. Alex took notes on his laptop, already thinking about how to turn these street-level insights into a workable program. "We'll need a building," his father said, getting excited. "Somewhere they can feel safe, not just beds, but a real community." "Leave that to me," Alex replied, already mentally scanning his real estate holdings. As they talked, Alex noticed his father's hands, once shaky and uncertain, were steady as he gestured, explaining his vision. The haunted look in his eyes was replaced by something new: hope. Later, after his father had gone to bed, Alex sat alone on the balcony. He thought about the past few weeks, how a random accident had turned into a second chance neither of them thought possible. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. "How are things going?" Alex looked through the glass doors at his father's room, where a soft light still glowed. "We're figuring it out," he texted back, "one day at a time." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more therapy sessions, more difficult conversations, more bridges to rebuild. But for now, in this moment, something that had been broken for 30 years was slowly starting to heal. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, the awkwardness between father and son began to fade. They developed small routines: morning coffee on the balcony, take-out dinners where they'd swap stories about their days. But today was different. Today, Alex's mother was coming to visit. "Maybe this isn't a good idea," his father said for the 100th time, pacing the living room. He'd changed his shirt 3 times already. "She's happy now. She's moved on." "She wants to see you," Alex assured him. "She wouldn't have come if she didn't." The doorbell rang, and both men froze. Alex watched his father's face go pale, saw his hands start to tremble. Taking a deep breath, Alex walked to the door and opened it. His mother stood there, looking elegant as always in her simple blue dress. Her hair had more gray now than when Alex had last seen her, but her eyes were still sharp and bright. "Hi, Mom," Alex said softly, hugging her. She hugged him back tightly, then pulled away to look past him. Her breath caught as she saw his father standing there, looking old and vulnerable in his new clothes. "Linda," his father whispered. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then his mother walked slowly across the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She stopped in front of her ex-husband, studying his face. "You got old," she said finally. "You didn't," he replied, and there was a ghost of their old warmth in his voice. She reached out and touched his cheek just for a moment. Then she dropped her hand and turned to Alex. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Alex led them to his home office, then retreated to the kitchen, giving them space. Through the closed door, he could hear the murmur of their voices, sometimes rising in anger, sometimes falling to whispers, sometimes breaking with tears. An hour passed. 2. Alex ordered lunch but didn't dare interrupt them. Finally, the door opened. Both his parents emerged with red eyes but calm faces. "Your father told me about the veteran program you're planning," his mother said, sitting down at the kitchen counter. "It's a good idea." "We could use your help," Alex said carefully. "You always were the best at organizing things." She shot him a look that said she knew exactly what he was doing. But then she smiled, a small, sad smile. "I'll think about it." They had lunch together, the three of them, and it was both strange and familiar. His mother talked about her garden in Portland, his father shared funny stories from his therapy group, and Alex watched them both, marveling at how life could come full circle. After his mother left, promising to return next month, his father sat quietly on the couch, lost in thought. "You okay?" Alex asked. "She forgave me," his father said wonderingly. "I don't deserve it, but she forgave me." "That's what family does," Alex replied. "We forgive each other." The next morning, they visited the building Alex had found for their veteran program. It was an old hotel in need of renovation, but it had potential, lots of rooms, a large kitchen, common areas for meetings and activities. "This could work," his father said, walking through the dusty lobby. "We could put the counseling offices here, maybe a job training center in the basement. And upstairs? Apartments, not just beds, real homes. Places where people can rebuild their dignity." Alex watched his father move through the space, pointing out possibilities, planning improvements. This was a different man from the broken soul he'd found on the streets. This was the father he remembered from his childhood, strong, capable, full of ideas. "I want you to run it," Alex said suddenly. His father stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "The program. I want you to be in charge. You know what these veterans need better than anyone. You can connect with them, help them in ways nobody else can." "Son, I haven't run anything in 30 years. I've been living under bridges. And that's exactly why you're perfect for this. You've been there. You know the way back. And I'll be right here to help." His father walked to one of the dirty windows, wiping away grime to look out at the street. "There's a guy who sleeps in that doorway across the street," he said quietly. "Used to share my spot under the bridge. Navy vet. Good man. Just lost his way, like I did." "He could be our first resident," Alex suggested. His father turned back, and there were tears in his eyes. "You really trust me with this?" "Dad, a month ago I was worried about stock prices and board meetings. Now I'm learning what really matters. You're teaching me that. So yes, I trust you. Completely." That night, they sat up late making plans. His father knew every veteran shelter in the city, every soup kitchen, every place where lost souls gathered. Alex took notes, already thinking about staffing, funding, permits. "We'll need doctors," his father said. "Good ones who understand PTSD. And job counselors. And—" "We'll get them," Alex promised. "Whatever it takes." Around midnight, his father yawned and stood up to head to bed. But at the hallway he paused. "Son." "Yeah, Dad." "Thank you, not just for this, but for giving me a chance to be your father again." Alex smiled. "Thank you for being brave enough to take that chance." After his father went to bed, Alex stayed up, looking at their notes. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a lonely billionaire thinking he had everything he needed. Now he had his father back, a new purpose, and a chance to make a real difference in the world. 1 year had passed since that rainy night when a random accident changed 2 lives forever. The veteran housing program, now named New Beginnings, was celebrating its first anniversary. The old hotel lobby, once dusty and abandoned, was filled with people, laughter, and hope. Alex stood at the back of the room, watching his father work the crowd. Gone was the homeless man from under the bridge. In his place stood a confident leader in a well-fitted suit, sharing success stories with donors and city officials. But what made Alex proudest was how his father still connected with every veteran who came through their doors, sitting with them late into the night, listening to their stories, sharing their pain. "Your dad's amazing," said one of their residents, a former Marine who'd arrived 3 months ago. "First night I was here, couldn't sleep. Too used to the streets. He sat up with me till dawn, just talking. Made me feel like I mattered again." Alex smiled, remembering his own sleepless nights with his father in those early days of their reunion. That's who he is. He never forgot what it felt like to be lost. His mother had flown in for the celebration. She'd kept her word about helping, flying down from Portland twice a month to organize their administrative systems. She and his father had found a new way to be family, not as husband and wife anymore, but as partners in something bigger than themselves. "Ladies and gentlemen," his father's voice carried across the room, "I want to thank you all for coming today. 1 year ago, this building was empty. Today, it's home to 57 veterans who are rebuilding their lives. 32 have found full-time jobs, 25 have reunited with their families, and every single one of them has found hope again." The room burst into applause. Alex watched as his father waited for it to die down, then continued. "But I'm not just the director of this program. I'm also its first success story. A year ago, I was sleeping under a bridge, convinced my life was over. Then I had an accident, probably the luckiest accident of my life. It reunited me with my son, gave me a second chance I didn't think I deserved." His father's eyes found Alex in the crowd, and both men felt the weight of that moment. To all the veterans out there who think it's too late, who think they've lost too much, it's never too late. Your family misses you. Your country needs you. And places like New Beginnings are here to help you find your way home. Later, after the crowds had gone, Alex and his father sat in what had become their favorite spot, the rooftop garden. The vegetables they planted were thriving now, tended by residents who'd found peace in watching things grow. "Remember that first night in the hospital?" Alex asked. "When I found out who you were?" His father nodded. "I was so ashamed. Thought you'd want nothing to do with me once you knew the truth. And now look at us. Look at all this." Alex gestured at the garden, the building, the city spread out below them. "We turned an accident into a miracle. You know what I'm most proud of?" His father said quietly. "Not the program, not the awards, not even getting my life back together. I'm most proud that I got to see the man you've become, that I get to be your father again." Alex felt tears in his eyes. "You never stopped being my father, Dad. Even when you were gone, the good parts of you stayed with me. The way you used to make me laugh, how you taught me to always help others. I just wish I hadn't missed so much." "We can't change the past," Alex said, echoing words they'd said so often this past year. "But we're making up for lost time. And more importantly, we're helping other families avoid our mistakes." His father pulled out his phone and showed Alex a photo. It was one of their recent residents, hugging his teenage daughter for the first time in 5 years. "This is why we do it," his father said. "Every family reunited, every veteran who finds their way home, it heals a little piece of my heart too." As the sun set over San Francisco, father and son sat in comfortable silence. Below them, in the rooms of New Beginnings, 57 veterans were working on their own second chances. Some were studying for job certifications, others were writing letters to estranged family members, all were healing. Alex thought about that rainy night a year ago, how close his car had come to tragedy instead of transformation, how a moment that could have ended in loss had instead sparked a journey of recovery, redemption, and love. "Ready for dinner?" his father asked, standing up. "Your mom's cooking at my place tonight. Said something about trying to recreate that spaghetti sauce you used to love as a kid." Alex smiled. "Race you to the car." His father laughed, that full, genuine laugh that had once been lost but was now found again. "Some things never change, do they?" "No," Alex said, thinking of the love that had survived 30 years of separation, the bond that had never truly broken. The important things never do. Together, they walked down from the roof of New Beginnings, leaving behind the garden where hope grew alongside the vegetables. They were no longer a billionaire and a homeless man, no longer strangers reunited by accident. They were simply father and son, walking side by side into a future they'd built together.